everyone is clapping, right? But you know, what happens when you're like, you're just not so sure about it and how people feel about you? And have you ever been in a meeting with someone of a huge like influence, and maybe a job interview or a academic review about your qualifications, or maybe it was they were reviewing your dissertation, or another situation where you felt like your future just hung in the balance, and it just hung in the balance over this one person's decision about your life. Well, then, you know, if you can imagine that, you've probably been in situations like that. I know I have. But if you can imagine that, you can understand what Nehemiah is feeling when he stood in the presence of a king. So we're going to go back, and it's the 5th century BC, and he was living in Susa, and this was the home of the king's winter palace. And so what's happening briefly is he is in exile in Susa because the Babylonians, they conquered his homeland Judah, and then they carried the Jews into captivity, and this was as a judgment for their disobedience to God. And so after the Persians, then after that, the Persians then conquered these Babylonians. And so here we find Nehemiah, he ends up serving the Persian king Artaxerxes I. And so what was happening was the exiles from Judah, they remained their own distinct community within Persia. And what happened was some of them rose to really high rank, and that was what brought Nehemiah before the king as his cupbearer. And basically the role of a cupbearer was basically to taste the king's wine so he wouldn't get poisoned. But it was a very high position, because it wasn't just that he was, the king would confide in him. He was a companion to the king. And so he was he would give advice. And so he was in this position of complete trust. So here's Nehemiah, and he's standing before the king, and he's pouring out his wine for him, and he's just really, really nervous. And he's nervous because, for one thing, he's heartbroken inside, and he's trying to keep a brave face on, but inside his heart is just aching, because news has arrived all the way from Judah. And what was happening is Jerusalem was in a terrible state. The people who escaped in exile, the report about them was that they were in great distress and reproach, and that the wall of Jerusalem is also broken down, and the gates burn with fire, and moreover, without a wall, you know, the people of Jerusalem, they were left defenseless against their enemies. So he's nervous, and he's also really nervous because it isn't wise to display sadness before the king, because a servant was never to let his or her negative emotions show, because the king might think you're dissatisfied with him, and so to do so would be to jeopardize your position and even your life. So you never let him see you sweat, or you're really in trouble. So he's nervous about that, and I think the biggest reason he's nervous is because he is about to present this monumental request to the king. And so he's pouring wine, and he knows in his heart that he can't back out, regardless of how he feels or the consequences. And at some point, you know, he's just waiting for the green light in this conversation, and he knows that he has no choice. He knows he has to be bold regardless of how afraid he is, and he has to be vulnerable, and moreover, he has to let the king what he's in on, what he's feeling. So here, why is he nervous? Well, for one thing, he's going to ask the king if he can leave and go on a journey and take a leave of absence to go all the way to Judah, which is like 900 miles, you know, which is like 4 months of travel. And also, he doesn't just want to go visit his friends. He wants to go rebuild the city, and he wants of Jerusalem, and he wants to repair this broken wall. And so his request is this bold request that he's waiting, and he's nervously waiting, anticipating this green light from the king. And because the problem is, if it's not bad enough to ask the king to go away and rebuild a city, the problem is steeper, because years earlier, this very same king had issued a decree to stop the construction of broken Jerusalem, because some of his enemies had convinced them that if rebuilding the wall and rebuilding the temple, that what would happen is it would be a threat to his reign. So he's thinking, okay, I got to ask for this, I got to ask for rebuild the city, I got to go away, and oh yeah, by the way, I'm going to have the audacity to ask the king to go back on the decree that he publicly issued. So, and then, if that isn't scary enough, okay, it gets worse. So then he's thinking, okay, I'm going to ask him that, and then now I've got another request. So if all goes well, he's going to ask the king for more. He wants letters of authorization. He wants construction supplies. Nehemiah knew he would be opposed by some of his enemies on his journey, so he asked for permission to pass through these areas, and he also knew that he would need supplies and wood and timber, and he also, and to top it off, of course, he would have to have a house. So, hey, when you get the opportunity like Nehemiah, I mean, if you know, when you've gone that far off the edge, hey, you might as well just go big, right? So here's the thing, but the king has no reason to supply him with one board. Why should he? He has no reason at all. And so here he's afraid, and so how does Nehemiah get what he needs? What needs to happen in his life? And because he can't do it on his own, you know, so he has to depend on the favor of God. You know, when we moved to Berkeley to start this church, you know, I had no idea what I was in for, because I thought, you know, okay, so our problems are going to be like resistance against Christianity, and we're going to be debating all the time, and that was my image of what we were going to go through. And you know, I knew there'd be other issues and stuff, but that was my thing. Oh yeah, that's resistance. But who knew? I didn't know how much it was about real estate. I didn't know how much it was about the negotiations, the miracles, and the drama of just finding a place to meet. You know, and we had no way to obtain any locations. We had nothing to offer except insufficient rent money. And that's all we had. And even one of our realtor just laughed at us one day when we made an offer on a building. He just thought it was so funny. But so we had nothing but God to depend upon. And so Nehemiah, he needs grace on his journey and his mission, and especially on his calling from God. So he's earlier he was anticipating this meeting, and so he prayed to God, and this is what he prayed. He said, "Let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man." So finally, then the king opens the door for Nehemiah and asks him what's wrong. "Hey, why is your face set since you're not sick? This is nothing but sorrow of heart." So Nehemiah, what he does, he just breathes a quick prayer, and he's thinking, yes, finally, he's relieved. And he pours out his heart to the king. The king listens to his appeal, finds out what Nehemiah needs, and grants him a request and appoints him governor over Judah, and done. So here's what's important, is that Nehemiah's, I think his words here sum up the whole experience, his whole experience in the presence of the king, when he says, "And the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me." Wow, the good hand of my God upon me. Wouldn't that be great? What's that like? I would love to experience that all the time. And this is what God has for us today. And I believe this Sunday is the Sunday of the good hand of God. And not because of what we've done or what we've earned, but just because of his favor and his mercy. So how do I find this? How do I find this favor with God that Nehemiah found? And what was it about him? What was it about him that the favor, the grace of God was just so evident in his situation? And this month we're doing a teaching on blessing the city, and what I want to talk to you is about finding God's favor in your life and how God can use your influence to accomplish his purposes in your environment. And so we have to find out what are the qualities or advantages that Nehemiah had where he could discover in the end that the hand of God was on him. Well, he had so many qualities and leadership abilities, but there's just a few that just kind of stand out among the rest. And the first thing was that he recognized that the kingdom, he recognized that his position in the kingdom, he was not there by accident. That God had him there. It's like Esther when she had the position of queen for such a time as this. He was there for a reason. And so God calls these cupbearers for a reason, because he has a higher purpose. And so we can be an influence. We can be in this right place at the right time. And all of us, you know what? We're all cupbearers in some situations. And we may not be in charge all the time, but we have significant influence. So if you're a cupbearer today and you're in a position of influence, it's not because of how great you are. It's because God had you there for a reason, and he has a plan to use you for his purposes. And Earl and I have been ambassadors for the Chamber of Commerce for a few years, and I know it's not because of us, because of our personalities. I know it's simply because God has us there for a reason. And the reason I know is because that it's not by accident, because every time they have an event, every time we get together, we are always talking about God constantly, and we don't have to bring it up. People just approach us. So I know that we are cupbearers in this organization because of God's purposes. And the second thing is that Nehemiah, his life was not about him. It was not about himself. His life was focused on God's purposes, not his own. And so you find his request to the king wasn't about him, and wasn't about, hey, where's my iPhone and where's the remote? It was about Jerusalem. It was about what God had put in his heart, and to go there and make repairs. It was this huge, his heart, his purposes, his life was focused on this huge construction project. It was about all the leaders who would be involved and take a role in building the gates and hanging doors. And you can almost, when you read about this in chapter 2, you can almost hear them working. And so the city was actually rebuilt in part of Nehemiah's reforms. And so when you're focused on God's purposes and you put yours aside, He will help you. He will help you to succeed in your life. And even his prayers, Nehemiah's prayers, they went way beyond himself. They were about they weren't just about him. They were God's people. They were about God's things. When you hear Nehemiah's heart, you can even hear his heart go out to the people of Israel in his prayers. And you can tell a lot about a person with how they pray. And you can just hear his heart when he prays. I pray before you now. He prays day and night for the children of Israel, your servants, and confess the sins of Israel, which we have sinned against you. So when we pray for cities, we pray for friends, we pray for colleagues, we pray for people who need to know the Lord, we tap right into God's heart. Right there, you're feeling the pulse of God, because he wants everyone to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. You know, I really like this Facebook post I just saw, the 72-hour prayer meeting at Sproul Hall to pray for the cities. And that's just a great example of how believers can come together and intercede for the city and lift their city to God. And so another thing about Nehemiah was that he was prepared. He was ready for his moment of destiny, his moment with the king. You know, he already had the position, he had his heart. You know, God had put this, he had interceded, but yet he was also prepared. You know, I imagine he probably had prepared this moment ahead of time. He was thinking about, okay, so what am I going to say? How am I going to approach the king? He probably had this speech prepared in his head, or he probably rehearsed it over and over, you know, what he was going to say and how and what it would include. And you can see that he did his homework, because he anticipated and he thought through what he would need. He knew he'd need letters of permission. He knew he would need supplies, and he actually knew who the guy, the go-to was for the supplies, Asaph. He knew who he was. And so you never know what opportunities God will bring your way. You just never know. That's why you need to be prepared. One Sunday morning, it was a few years ago, at a church we were attending, it was announced that the president of Ethiopia was going to visit our city, and the pastor of the church, he had connections in this country and in the political system, and he knew the president and personally, and so a banquet at our church was prepared in his honor, and of course he was going to speak, and so we heard the announcement. We were like, yeah, we're not going to go, because the tickets were like $50, and so we just decided not to go. So the very day of the banquet, the pastor calls us and says, hey, I want you to go, both of you to go, and I'm going to pay for your tickets. So we went. So right when we arrived at the church, the pastor met us right in the lobby, inside the door. And immediately he wanted to take us to go meet the president. And so I was so surprised, because I had prepared it, because I was reluctant. So I told the pastor, I don't remember what I said. I said, we can't, because we're really, we're not dressed up enough. We didn't dress for this. And because I hadn't planned on meeting him personally, I was just going to go into the dining area, the huge dining area, and just going to take my little seat and sit down. And I've been to so many banquets. That's what I was going to do. A banquet's a banquet. And so I was banquet ready. I looked good for a banquet. I've been to so many of them, church banquets, so I looked good for a banquet. But however, I wasn't ready to meet the president. And so but the pastor, he insisted. He says, don't worry about it, just come on. And, so he drags us down this long hallway, and past this whole line of people who were in line to meet the president. And the women were all dressed up in these party dresses and expensive jewelry, and the men had suits and ties, and some of them were in tuxes. And so they were all dressed up. And so we went past this line of people waiting, and he put us ahead of the line, and he led us into this room where the president was sitting. It was like a living area. And so the president was sitting in this wing-back chair, and he was a rather large man, I think, and it was clear he had this expensive, beautifully tailored dark suit with a tie, and he had his bodyguards all around, and he had these really sharp metal-framed glasses. And so he was in this chair, and they led us to sit down on this small couch next to the president. So we were sitting there, and the president, I was really impressed that he started to make conversations with us, and he was an older man, and it was just interesting how he was interested in knowing us. And it was just, let me say, it was just us. It was just Earl and I sitting next to him with some onlookers waiting for their turn, the bodyguards. And so the idea was that to give everybody in line just a few minutes with the president. So I remember Earl was his usual charming self, making conversation like the president was like the next door neighbor. And I don't remember a whole lot about the conversation except that we talked about his Earl's job at the seminary where he worked. Now here's the thing: if I had to do it again, I would have been ready. I would have been all dressed up. I would have researched the country. I would have had these great topics of conversation. I would have been very good, I think, or at least I would have been more prepared than I was. So you never know. You just never know what doors God's going to open in your life. So my question today is, are you ready? Am I ready to meet the president of Ethiopia? Are you ready for your moment of influence? I know that so many of you are working on your careers and on your future, and I know it must be so difficult. But I want to encourage you today that, don't give up. Don't give up what you're doing. Don't give up whatever you're involved in, whatever your future, your class, your school, whatever you're involved in, because, in the end, it's all going to be worth it when you stand in these places, when God elevates you and brings you in these places of influence. So are you ready to meet the president? Well, you know what? There's an app for that. I'll see if I can find it. A couple weeks ago, our friend Rebecca, told us that there was an app to learn new languages. I have it right here. And so what I did was I got the Spanish version of it. It's called Duolingo or something. And so I'm learning Spanish. So with my app. And so because you never know, one day I may meet another president again. And maybe I'll need to know Spanish. So how do I really find God's favor? How did Nehemiah do it? You just ask him. Just ask. We can't go it alone. Having a successful career and impressive education just isn't enough, because we need the grace of God. People tell you, the culture tells you just do it alone. But you know what? The real truth is we need God. We need His grace. We need His favor in our lives. One day, you may be praying something like this. This is what Nehemiah prayed when he wanted favor. You may be praying this. You may be praying this now, but this is what your prayer might sound like. Oh Lord, I pray, please let your ear be attentive to the prayer of your servants and up to the prayer of your servant and to the prayer of your servants who desire to fear your name, and let your servant prosper this day, I pray, and grant him mercy. Nehemiah, he discovered that the good hand of God was on him. God is for you. Jesus offers his acceptance. He's here. He accepts you. He offers it to you because he has promised. He says his favors is to all who come to him. He has promised, but as many as received him, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believe in his name, who were born not of blood nor of will of man, but of God. Wow, if you're the child of God, that to me, that is great favor. Because as many, the scripture says, as many, you're sons of God. You have favor because you're sons of God. As many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. And if God is for us, who can be against you? If God is for you, who can be against you? And his favor, scripture says his favor is just not here and there and okay, up and down. His favor is for a lifetime. So I'm asking you this morning, how many of you want the favor of God in your life today? And the band's going to be playing in a little while. We're going to be taking communion. But right now, I'm going to ask some people who are here to pray with you, and I'm going to ask them to come. And we're going to pray with you this morning that God will give you favor. So if you want favor in your life today, today's the Sunday of favor, and we're going to be praying with you about that. And those of you who are being prayed for after you come and have prayer, feel free. We're going to do communion today, and it's optional. Feel free to take the communion elements and go to your seat. And the rest, anyone else, if you want to be communion, you can come now and be prayed, get prayer, or you can come as the band, as musicians play. You can come and get your elements and be seated. And later, Churro is going to come, and he is going to lead us in the communion elements. So if you want favor from God, just come now. We have people who are going to pray for you. God is a calling on each one of your life, and He's calling you to be a cupbearer. And He wants to give you this vision. He wants you to see yourself in the purposes of God. He wants to see yourself as a cupbearer. And He wants to give you grace and mercy for your situation. So you come right now. We're going to be praying for you, and then we're going to do communion.